Welcome to the Black Bibliophile podcast. The Black Bibliophile is a podcast where I, Jazz, read and talk about popular and little-known books, comics, zines, and authors. To quote Haruki Murakami, "If you only read the books that everyone else is reading, you can only think what everyone else is thinking." And with that, let's start the show. Welcome back to the Black Bibliophile podcast. This is your host, Jazz. I just wanted to say what's up, fellow bibliophiles, and thank you for the warm welcome back. This week, we're going to trail away from my science fiction obsession and leap into my secret love of romance novels. I don't talk about them much on this show, but we're going to change that. So let's hop in and just talk about all the good stuff. So this week on my 2 books to check out segment, the first book is Contact High, which is actually a zine written by James F. Wright with art by Josh Eckert. This book takes place in a society where touch has been outlawed, and it features 2 male protagonists, which is just in time for Pride Month. And I chose this book because James weaves a wonderful story, and it's just jaw-dropping, and I just recommend that everybody pick this up. It's on Gumroad this month on a pay-as-you-can-afford scale, which is pretty dope, and I'll leave that link in the show notes. So let's read the summary so you guys can get a good feel for what it's about. An Eisner Award-nominated story about a future where people are forced to live their lives in protective suits. Skin-to-skin contact is akin to a drug addiction. This is the story of what one man will endure amid these conditions to feel the touch of another. So please check out that book. You can get it online at Gumroad. I'll leave the link in my show notes. The second book I wanted to talk about, which is nominated for an Eisner Award this year, so for those of you who can vote, please vote. You can go, I'll leave that link to vote for the Eisners in the show notes also, so you guys know what to do, and a great article about how to vote in the show notes, so look out for that. But this book, Bitter Root, Volume 1, Family Business by David Walker, Chuck Brown, and art by Sanford, Greene, is about a family who hunt monsters. So here's a summary. Once known as the greatest monster hunters of all time, the Sangre family specialized in curing the souls of those infected by hate, but those days are fading. A terrible tragedy has claimed most of the family, leaving the surviving cousins split between curing monsters and killing them. Now with a new breed of monster on the loose on the streets of Harlem, the Sangre family must come together or watch the human race fall to untold evil. I chose this book. I just read it, this trade paperback, and it's amazing. It just came out in trade, and I do recommend it. It's black-led, black-written, black-drawn book, and honestly, it's worth all the hype it's getting. I'll leave the link to it in the show notes, but I think you can go to any comic book shop or local bookstore and order it from them, because again, we here at the Black Bibliophile podcast like to support small business, and I adamantly think you should support small business also. So, with that all done, let's move on to the author's spotlight of this week, which I've chosen Samantha Irby. Samantha Irby is an American comedian, author, and blogger. She runs the blog Bitches Gotta Eat, where she writes posts about her personal life and events. Irby also co-hosted the live hit show Guts and Glory in Chicago with Keith Eckert until 2015. And she's also written 2 books, Meaty and We're Never Meeting in Real Life. I chose Samantha Irby because I love her work, and I wanted to share the hilarity of her books to anyone who will listen. I discovered her, I went to a talk at UCR where Roxane Gay was speaking, and someone in the audience asked her what she's been reading, and she said, I've been reading Samantha Irby's We're Never Gonna Meet in Real Life. And I've been hunting down that book since that that talk. I completely forgot the name, couldn't write it down. I was so enthralled with the talk that we were having with Roxane Gay that I could only remember Irby or Samantha as her first name. But eventually I found the book, I've read the book, which I love the book, and I'll talk about it in a later podcast. But I really, really, really cannot recommend enough Samantha Irby's blog, bitchesgottaeat.com, which I'll leave in the show notes, and all of her books. I just got Meaty, and I can't wait to start reading that. But there's also, if you guys have the app Libby, which is like, I'm going to plug Libby right now. Libby is an app that is like an e-reader, has audiobooks and magazines, and if you have a public library card, if you're in Los Angeles, I'm sure across the nation, most libraries sync with Libby. You can check out books digitally from this app. And from this app, I was able to check out one of her short story compilations about her New Year's resolutions, and it was hilarious. So I think if you guys are able, you should definitely check out Libby. Download it on your phone, your apps. You can check out any books. You can listen to any audiobooks, and you don't have to pay for it. It's completely free, paid for by your taxes. Public library sponsored, and I literally discovered it like last week, and it's changed my entire life. So please, please, please check out Libby if you guys want to, check out books but not pay for them. That's what the library is about, giving us all access to books, magazines, and everything. And I'll throw that link in the bio too. This isn't sponsored by Libby. I just discovered it and realized I could save a ton of money if I just went to the library. But since I don't leave my house, if I just checked my books out on Libby. So yeah, check out Samantha Irby because she's dope, and also check out Libby because that app is what's up. And now, let's take a break. Back to the show. Welcome back. Let's get into our book review. This week's book is The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. Here's the summary. A groomsman and his last-minute guests are about to discover if a fake date can go the distance in this fun, flirty, multicultural romance debut by New York Times best-selling author Jasmine Guillory. So this book is written by a Black woman, and stars, the lead protagonist in the story is a Black woman. And I discovered this book, again, through listening to another podcast called The Nod, shout out The Nod, where they interviewed Jasmine Guillory for their podcast, talking about romance novel and how romance novels are so very white. And I've had this problem when reading romance novels. I never saw myself featured in the text, so I often stayed away from those books. But then when I listened to this podcast, they were talking about The Wedding Date and how it wasn't like a Zane chronicle or anything like that. It was just a Black woman who was a lawyer and working at city council, trying to get things done, happens to fall in love one day. And it's like a romantic, like a rom-com movie setup, but starring a Black woman, which never happens. So I picked up this book because I was like, okay, the Nod's usually A1 on their choices, and I read it in one night. Like, I just binge read the entire book. It's honestly one of my favorite books I've read this year. And it features this woman. She's busy, she's work oriented, she works for City Hall in Berkeley, and she's trying to implement this new program to help the troubled youth in her area. She's going to meet her sister, who flew into town to see her at this hotel, where she gets trapped in an elevator with this handsome doctor, and they hit it off, and out of nowhere he asks her to be his wedding date, and then the hilarity and romance ensues. I think this book is fantastic, and Jasmine Guillory really does a great job at selling the romance and the difficulties with being a Black woman and trying to find love. I just related so much into this book. So, a little background on the author. Jasmine Guillory is a New York Times bestselling author of The Wedding Date, The Proposal, and the forthcoming The Wedding Party. Her work has appeared in Cosmopolitan, Really Simple, OprahMagazine.com, Shondaland.com, and she lives in Oakland, California. The Wedding Date is a part of like a trilogy, so all of her characters are connected. They know each other, which is really, really cool. So it's like a little wedding trilogy, which is really dope. And it's not predictable, which I really appreciate about her books. When I thought one thing was going to happen, it went another way. The writing is fluid. You believe the characters. At certain points, I got annoyed with the main character's love story, because at one point they stopped talking because, you know, they have to have some kind of split up or something. And I guess I was annoyed because it was too true to life. Like I felt like I was being called out, and I was like, y'all just need to pick up each other's phone and just explain this out. Like, it's just at a certain point, the chapters were just them avoiding each other, and I got annoyed. So I guess that was the point of the writing. Like, oh, you guys are being silly. Just talk to each other, and you know you're meant to be, blah, blah, blah. But I guess that's a test to her writing, that it's such a good story that I actually got annoyed with the characters and believed their love story so much to get emotionally involved. So I guess me being annoyed is actually a kudos to Jasmine Guillory for being so dope at writing her characters. The themes of the book focus on are, of course, love and insecurities. I did love seeing myself reflected in this situation of just a black woman trying to find love, trying to navigate a mostly white space and still be shown to be insecure. Like, most characters, especially black women characters, have to be strong black women, or have to be these pillars of stability and all this. And I like this story that shows a vulnerable side to being a black woman. So I think this book is great because of that, and I really do think everybody should pick it up. Jasmine Guillory writes an amazing love story, and of course this book is available everywhere. I read it digitally, I believe, but I know you can check it out on Libby. You can check out all of her books on Libby. So if you would like to, please support your public libraries. Download Libby, go get a library card, and then go get this book, because this book is dope. It's called The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. Now, let's move on and let's talk about comics. One of my favorite subjects, something I cannot exclude in this show. Like, every episode's going to have somewhere where I'm talking about comics. And this week, I read Genderqueer, a memoir by Maia Kobabe. Kobabe? I feel like I'm saying their name properly. Their pronouns are ear, so I'm going to pause every once in a while when I'm using ear pronouns. So work with me. I've never heard of, I think they're called Spivak pronouns, and I've never heard of them until I read this book. So just work with me on this one. Let me read the summary. In 2014, Maia, who uses ear pronouns, thought that a comic of reading statistics would be the last autobiographical comic E would ever write. At the time, it was the only thing E felt comfortable with strangers knowing about them. Now, Genderqueer is here. Maia's intensity, cathartic autobiography charts Ear's journey of self-identity, which includes the mortification and confusion of adolescent crushes, grappling with how to come out to a family and society, bonding with friends over erotic gay fiction, and facing the trauma and fundamental violation of pap smears. Started as a way to explain Ear family what it means to be non-binary and asexual, Genderqueer is more than a personal story. It is a useful and touching guide on gender identity, what it means and how to think about it for advocates, friends, and humans everywhere. So I read this comic in one sitting, like I do most books and comics, and I did enjoy Maia's art style and Ear's storytelling abilities. I really enjoyed Maia's work with explaining how M worked with talking about Ear's gender. So in the story, Maia goes from trying to figure out Ear's gender identity throughout different stages in Ear's life. So I enjoyed watching Maia's self-discovery, and I enjoyed the art style that Ear uses. My problem with the story was at times it felt like the pacing was off, and I don't know if that was what it really was. I enjoyed the identification and the story M were telling, or E were telling, but I don't know, the book didn't quite sit with me in a way that most memoir comics do. I learned so much, like the Spivak pronouns and how asexual identity and gender, being gender queer really work in, it wasn't for me, I'm guessing. Like, I enjoyed the story and I learned a lot, and I valued Ear's expression of their gender and their story and their life. I just didn't click with me. And I still think it's a good book. Like, I did like the book. It just wasn't something that I completely clicked with, which is, like, not every book is for everybody. And I do think I would read it again, and I do think it's a great tool for people to learn more about being genderqueer and asexual, and how being genderqueer isn't something that somebody decides, it's just who they are. And I feel like this book is a great way of showing that, because Maia's journey of being genderqueer has been their entire life. And I feel like this book is a great tool for people to read and use and learn more about gender identity and things like that. So I feel like I do recommend that book in this capacity. But for me personally, as someone who's read a ton of books and like memoir comics, it didn't click with me in the way that I thought it would. But that doesn't mean it's not good. It's a good book. It's just not something that I'm like jumping up and down over about. Does that make sense? It was good though. I do recommend it, and I do think people should check it out. So yeah. And for my final segment of this podcast, we're gonna hop into the zine corner. And zines are, for those of you who don't know, small booklets, usually self-made, sometimes not, released by the creators themselves. They have staples running down the spine. Sometimes they're sewn down the middle. And for this week, I'm focusing on Silver Sprocket Comics, Magical Beatdown Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Jen Woodall. Magical Beatdown is a hyper-violent street harassment revenge fantasy in the style of Sailor Moon, about an average video game loving schoolgirl who transforms into a foul-mouthed and rage-filled magical girl when provoked. Watch in awe as she swiftly disposes of street harassers with her impressive array of magical weapons. So this book, self-explanatory, is like inspired by Sailor Moon and, you know, beating up dudes who call out to you on the street. I'm here for it. And it's neon pink and neon blue ink. Jen's drawings are fantastic and mesmeric. The story is brutal and hilarious at times. I highly recommend these zines. In the story, the main hyper-violent protagonist hunts down dudes who are just assholes and call out girls and attack them. And she sticks up for the women who can't, and she transforms, a la Sailor Moon, into her eye patch wearing, sword wielding, motorcycle riding, badass self, and beats the crap out of these guys and makes the world a better place. That's literally the whole book, both of them. and they're amazing. Jen Woodall's art is glorious, and I highly recommend it. Definitely think you should pick these up. You can get them at silversprocketcomics.com. You could probably get them at Jen's Woodall's personal site, and I'll leave all of the links to where you can get it in the show notes. You should also check out all your local comic book shops, because they could probably order it for you. It has been featured in the Diamond catalog, which is where you order comics if you own a comic book shop. So I'm sure you can get that book anywhere. And yeah, that's the end of this week's Black Bibliophile episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, book recommendations, just want to email me and talk about stuff, you can email me at theblackbibliophile@gmail.com. If you would like to support the podcast, you can support the podcast on Patreon at The Black Bibliophile. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. And yeah, let's chat. Let's talk about books. Also, just saying, if you're a part of my Patreon, you can be a part of the Black Bibliophile book club. And this month's book is honestly one of my favorite books of all time. So if you guys are really, really down to read some dope sci-fi, check out the Patreon. It's only $1. That's my only tier, is $1. And you guys, we do a book club. We talk about the book or not. You just do what you want, I'm chill. We're all chill here. And yeah,